That's what that means.
Yay.
We're ready
Awesome.
to be on the internet.
Yay.
I know. It's just such a nice day. I hope it's nice where you're at.
It is so beautiful. It's up in the mountains and it's cool and it's green and it smells like pine trees. Well, you're used to that.
Yeah. I mean, we're right at the base of the mountains. So we've definitely got that going, which is exactly you said. It's absolutely beautiful. But there's also just like a nice vibe.
Oh,
Today's
it
a
feels
nice
so, yeah, it feels so good today. It's like we made a breakthrough.
right. And here's the
I'm
best
kind
part. I don't know what we broke through, but I'm like, yay.
I know.
So good.
Whatever it is. Yeah, I mean, we've been working, right?
We have. Well, and I don't know.
You've been working. Oh my.
Yeah, that I've been doing. I've been doing some of that.
Yeah.
And I have, you know, a prominent Mercury placement. So whenever Mercury's getting ready to do something, I just feel it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, but it's like, it's interesting because thinking about it in that very mental energy, like I feel it in my head, right? Like it feels like when Mercury goes retrograde, I'm like, I'm clearly going to be blind any minute. Like, because that's what's happening in my head. Like, I just feel like pressure there. And as it's coming out, I'm like, I can see again. So it's super interesting. All right. Welcome everybody to today's Eat and Greet. I'm so excited to have you guys here, and hopefully, you know, in this next little bit of time we spend together, we really give you something that is worth the time that you're showing up for. So if you like the video, if you like the content, you can talk to us in the chat down here. If you're listening on the podcast, you can definitely give this a stars up and leave comments under there as well. So Tami, welcome. Welcome.
Stormie, it's so good to be here.
We've been trying.
I know, right? We've tried for a while.
I know. I'm like, we've been trying for a minute, and then finally it's like, when it's supposed to land, we're going to land, and we're going to talk about something beautiful.
Yep, exactly. Just like it happens.
Yes. So you guys, I want to introduce you to Tami Brunk, and I have to tell you, it's so cool because she's a shamanic practitioner and does what is it called? It's not dream therapy. It's dream. What do you call it?
Yeah, I do. So I kind of marry the worlds of astrology and dreaming. And so my background is in active dreaming, which is a modality. It's a kind of shamanic dreaming practice that was developed by Robert Moss. And so I bring that and the astrology practices together. And
brilliant.
Yeah, it's fun. I'm sure I'm not the only one who works with dreams and astrology. I mean, and if everybody listening, I'm sure a lot of people actually already intuitively work with dreams and connected to cycles, but it's just a practice that I've been really immersed in now for the last 5 years.
Yeah. And so I always like to ask this question because there's a lot of different astrology. There's a lot of different practices. So how come you didn't end up as a humanistic astrologer? How did you find shamanic? How did you get here?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, basically I had my baby nephew, my sister had a baby, and she got a reading from Daniel Giamario, who sourced the shamanic astrology paradigm. And I listened to this reading and I just, you know, this feeling, it was like I knew it. The language, I just got it kind of in my bones. And it was just so moving to me. I'd always loved astrology, but it was so incredible to have this kind of very soulful understanding of what this baby's, what the soul intent was. And so from that moment, after hearing that, I got the Shamanic Astrology Handbook. I started using it. I did like hundreds of readings on all my friends and family. And the system itself, I think I chose because I so resonated with it. And also because, my background is as a naturalist, a biologist. My focus has always been on love of the earth and in my background. And Shamanic Astrology was one of the first systems where, as an astrologer, you were required to spend a tremendous amount of time under the night sky and working with the inner planets, the planets that you can actually visibly see. So for example, I really specialize in working with Venus and the Venus cycle. And so it integrates the stars as well. So I just, I wanted that visceral connection with the sky and not just my computer screen. And so it really kind of fit just with my background and who I am.
It's always amazing to see how people got where they are, but I think we all say the same thing. Like we understood the language. It is that
Yeah.
knowing where you're just, you kind of, you know, when you first get started, you're just maybe in the sea of astrology or the mix between intuition and
Right.
astrology, but that's like,
Hmm.
you don't quite have your space yet. And then somebody says something and it's like, oh, my tribe, let me go that way. Let me
Yep,
go there.
exactly.
I know how to tell those symbols. And so as you're coming along in your practice, how did dreams become paramount for you? I mean, it's one of the most natural things that we do.
Yeah, right. It's so basically, I think like a lot of spiritual seekers, and I think many astrologers are that, I have been looking for systems that can help me really connect to my intuition. We want to go to teachers and learn systems from many different modalities, but ultimately, I think many of us, we live in a time where we want to be able to find those answers inside. We want to be able to have that intimate, personal, inner knowing and that relationship with that inner guide. And I think, I was at a place where I was really learning to listen more deeply to myself and my own kind of sensation of truth. And I read, my dad was dying of cancer. Like I was going through some really intense, personal experiences. And I ended up seeing something in some shamanic online course about Robert Moss's workshop in Hawaii. And it was, I forget it was the Temple of Shamanic Dreaming or something like that. And it just, again, it was one of those things where it just grabbed me. Like I just knew that this is where I needed to go. It was way more money than I had. I put it on my credit card. First time I'd ever done that before. But I went and I ended up going. It was actually not long after my dad had passed. And I started learning with Robert this particular system of working with dreams. And I started doing the dream work, and it was a bit separate in some ways. I started weaving it into my personal cycles, but it wasn't until and then I immediately started teaching. I've got a lot of Gemini, Sagittarius. So as soon as I learn something, I teach it.
Yes.
And Aries also. So I started teaching the material. And then one of my breakthroughs was so incredible is that in 2015, I created this whole program called the Sky Apprentice Program. And it was a year-long immersive where people would learn about the basics of each of the planets and the signs. So every month we would dream with, so I would help them create a field of dreaming. And then we would actively dream with and do the inquiry of what is the new emerging expression of this sign? Because, our dreams connect us to our bodies. Our dreams connect us to more of a somatic experience of what's real. And so, so over the course of a year, we just were in this whole really deep practice of, we would set intentions before we went to sleep at night. If we, knowing what the sign of the moon was or knowing what star was going to be activated. And we would really deeply listen to what was coming through. It was a group of 12 of us, just 12. And that really created that practice in me. And I mean, it's one of the most magical years of my life because I was so deeply immersed in that. So those are just a few pieces of how I started working with it.
And so in your practice today, is it just the most natural woven thing, or are they still two separate things, or how does it show up in how you counsel people today?
That is a really good question. And, I have to say that I noticed that for myself, when I am really connected to my body, to my soul, that's when I'm really deeply immersed in the world of dreaming and of astrology and woven together. And in those times where I get somewhat fragmented, because I have those times of more forgetfulness, those worlds kind of come apart. So like right now, for example, like I was telling you before we started, I've been in a context of almost no personal space at all compared to what I'm used to. So my dream life has suffered as a result of that. And, as much as it's beautiful where I'm at, there's that piece. So I'm actually just now in a phase of recovering those things. So like this morning, I had a dream that was really potent. And of course, it immediately connects to where the moon's at. And that dream, well, yesterday, actually, I had a dream that was with this, it was like a baby, it was a baby goat. You know how goats, like baby goats jump like in that way that's kind of incredibly cute?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so this is one of those dreams, and we all know those dreams that just feel good. You know, you're having a hard time, and then you have a dream that gives you this sensation, this feeling when you wake up of like, oh, good, something's happening that's really good here. And that was the thing. I just saw this. I'll have like fragments that have incredible amount of medicine in them. And it was this little baby goat. And it was just like in this place, this poised like position of getting ready to like do that thing, like with all this joy in his body. Right.
Yes.
And it was so powerful. And it just, for me, it connected into this really strong Aries energy right now with Mars and with Chiron. As strange as it might seem to me, it felt like a remembrance of what is the essence of Aries? What is the true essence of Aries? It's that kind of, when it's healthy, it's just that exuberance, like in life. That's to me part of what happens in the dreaming, is making those connections.
So we have a question already, just right out the gate. We haven't even done too much yet.
Okay.
This person said, I've had a shift in my dreaming and I can't remember them anymore. What happens? What's happening for them potentially in your experience?
You know, it's such a common thing. And if you have, you know, just to say to you that if you have a really rich dreaming life, it can feel pretty bereft, you know, when we lose our dreams like that. It can feel like there's something that's off. And, you know, I think if you have small phases like that, it's natural to have that kind of experience, because sometimes I think we're living our dreams more in daily reality. If we're really active in the outer world, we're actually acting out all of those things that we need to be acting out. Sometimes it's when we're in a phase of more internal reflection that we have more dreams, because there's more that needs to constellate in that place in our psyche. So it can be just, it's a temporary thing. If it's something that goes on for a while and it's like a dream drought, I tend to think that it often, like for me, I need more time alone. I need to sleep by myself sometimes. I might need to go to bed earlier. I might need to create a little more spaciousness before I go to sleep and when I wake up. But what that tells me, if it goes on for a long time, is my soul life is not being fed as deeply as I want it to. My feminine soul is feeling somewhat dry. And so, you know, I think, again, what's it going to take for me to, and I think it's very much connected to womb wisdom. What's it going to take for me to connect more to that feminine receptive mode in my life, instead of being so much in the outer and in the masculine, so I can receive those dreams.
Right. And so to be super clear, when we're talking about womb wisdom and we're talking about stepping into that feminine wisdom, this is for men too. There is
that's absolutely true.
Yeah, there's this doing, let's go out and do kind of energy that we do, not because of patriarchy, not because of any cool words, just in its nature. And so when we talk about bringing it in that feminine space, that's about sit, ground for a minute. Let's put in here. And it's just the nature of it. It doesn't have anything to do with politics. Turns out.
No, it doesn't. And I think that, thank you for saying that, because I think, you know, men, my teacher was a man. He's profoundly connected to that feminine wisdom. And we, you know, men have a womb. It's called a hara. You know, it's like, and I think men in our culture and men need as much a connection to that as women. So I so appreciate you saying that. It's really vital for all of us.
Yeah. And the one thing I've learned in my time, so it's been just about 10 years now of being invited to Anipi with the Lakota people. And that has just taught me so much. And something I've really learned about dreaming and daily living is this place that you talk about in the men, where when they kind of get to this stopping block, they go, well, hold on, I'm not as attached to that, or I can't sense that as much. And they ask the women, and the women, you know, in the vice versa of that, say, I can't do that. I can't reach that. I can't. And they'll just ask. And it's so funny to say it like that, because to me, I think it sounds very traditional. I'm American, right? I'm a good old American.
Yeah,
it sounds very traditional, but instead it is just a working, cyclical, balanced energy. But they both just honor what's happening. And it's so empowered. You know, from what I've seen, there's no, oh my God, we can all do it all, right? It's not that, and not an attempt at that. And so there's this beautiful energetic balance. So neat.
Yeah, it is. I think it's a really powerful thing when you see that in a more traditional culture, in those ways where those different ways are honored and acknowledged. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about astrology and dreams today. I am not a trained dream person at all, but like you said, I come from that very intuitively. I have the same experience that you and many do. When my dream life is off, something needs to be addressed, because it's almost like there's a clog in the hole here, right?
Right. Yeah.
Right. So, but when I look at it and I think about how I interpret my dreams with my astrology, it's looking at who has shown up, and it is usually able to correlate to something going on in the sky into my chart. I mean, I can tell you when my Pluto is activated, it's just we're dying off. There's just, I mean, it's just like everything is death. You know what I mean? And it really has that for me, easy tie to the astrology. But you know, I don't know if that's like your pure experience with your astrology and the dreams, or how
Yeah.
you
I
walk
mean,
that.
it's interesting because for me, a lot of times it's not as literal, and that's just across the board. Um, and I love that yours is. I have had some of those periods like where I have Mars in Scorpio, and Mars was being strongly activated, and I had so many different kind of dark shamanic like energies that I felt in my dreams that I was having to navigate and learn how to, in some sense, master. And that was, I had those experiences too. But a lot of times for me, for example, when I very deliberately focused on working with the dreams, and in those times also where I've guided other groups through it, when we do that exploration and that research, for example, and we set the intention, I'll never forget when I set the intention to work with the North Node, and before I went to sleep, I asked for guidance in working with that. And I was in a real place of a lot of internal, like just distress. And I just remember when I woke up the next morning, because the moon was with the North Node, I got this really strong sensation and this feeling in my body. It was like spiritual chiropractics. It was like bringing everything into alignment. And that's the kind of thing that it just kind of stuck with me. Like I always feel now when the moon is with the North Node, that's the medicine of it. So, that's part of how it works for me. And also, what I've noticed is that in my dreaming life, that often when it's not actually for me just about dreams, I'll be clear. It's also about, for example, these periods of time where I'll wake up at like 3 a.m. and I can't sleep. And then I go outside and I'll see that the reason I can't sleep is because the moon is at, first quarter, and it's, conjunct this important star, or it's exactly where my sun was when I was born. It's triggering a personal point in the sky. So it's like the sky life, there's something about the night sky and the dream worlds that are deeply intertwined. So for me, it's not always about that literal meaning necessarily. It's more about any way we can, like, I think of it like we live in a world where this, like the web of creation has been ruptured. It's been kind of torn in a lot of ways. So many of us live in a disenchanted world. And as you know, from working with the Lakota, and anytime you work with Indigenous people, you realize that our ancestors all had this very different experience, that everything is alive, everything is sentient. You are in a conversation with the universe at all times. And I personally don't think there's anything more important than bringing that sense of the sacred back into people's consciousness. So for me, I think the work I do with dreams and the work I do with astrology is about reweaving an intimate connection between those worlds. And so, for example, when I first started doing this, I had so much fun. Like so I woke up one morning and I'd had this incredible dream with these priestesses, and they had this like cauldron, and they were doing this really deep work. It was a vivid, visceral dream. And so then I looked it up, and the moon was in Virgo. I connect the moon with, the Virgo with the priestess, right? So then I was doing a practice. I would go on a walk, and I was still in that conversation with the universe, like, okay, maybe there's another sign that kind of connects to more of what this is all about. And all of a sudden there was this huge flock of crows. So I go back in and I'm looking again at the stars that were activated exactly by the moon, and it was connected to Corvus the crow. So it was like right there aligned with the crow medicine too, right? And then I did a bibliomancy thing where I was like I have Jung's Red Book. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to open the Red Book. And I found another passage in there that connected deeply to these same mysteries. So it's kind of, again, like this, the way that universe, there's a call and response that happens. And when we begin to create space in our lives for those kinds of mysteries to come together, it does something inside of us to help us remember, I think, that this is it's a friendly universe, and it's speaking to us at all times. So for me, that's also just as much of what this practice is about.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love that you said that, because that is a part of my practice as I teach people. I'm like, the universe is actually quite kind, and you have been given every tool you need to do this assignment, whether that be the ability to ask that person for help, or to
Yeah.
get quiet, or whatever the strategic move is that you need. But like you said, I think we forget to put toes on the ground and sent back into the body and say, well, wait a minute, what is Saturn actually asking me? Because it has been proven through science that the physical body cannot lie. We just are not always great at interpretation. So ask your body what Saturn is asking of you. It will tell
Beautiful.
you,
Yeah.
right? And that has
Absolutely.
served me well. It's actually funny because I did an eat and greet. I don't know, it was probably about 6 weeks ago. And during the eat and greet, the person had made the comment, they're like, you're just so beautiful. And it just irritated the piss out of me. Right. Right. And in that time, what was happening is my Jupiter was getting some pressure put on it. And I'm deeply trying to get information and feel into it. And I'm going deep in this astrology business.
Yeah.
And I was like, in my head, of course, I'm like, I am more than cute. I have depth and I'm a good teacher. And this whole rise up happened.
Wow.
And the most beautiful part about that is that I'm outside laying under the sky and at the stars, and this beautiful pocket of the sky is just lit up. And I'm like, yes, and I'm going there. And they told me no. They said, no, not right now. You need to go to Venus. And I was like, shocked. And irritated, and then accepting, right? Because I was like, there's something here to be learned about more than just beauty, but about harmony, about the depth that Venus works with as well. And it was so beautiful the way it was a full body light up to exactly that comment that was made to me, that I was like, I don't even understand. For whatever reason, in that moment, I did not understand what that person was saying to me. I was simply where I was. And then it became a completely different, other things that happened during the week that were completely different, but it was very in the body and in the sky. So
Yeah.
those moments are priceless when we can bring them back down to earth.
Absolutely. And I think what I love about what you're saying is that really everything you're describing, I think when we get into subtler levels with all of this, it's giving us an opportunity to be in a deeper conversation with ourselves, more self-reflective, more self-aware. But it's not like some talk therapy thing that feels dry and boring. It's like, it's rich and it's nuanced and it's juicy. And it's like, it's because we're in this intimate like relationship with everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And, to ask the sky to say, oh, I want to study here and I want to see what you're about, and to be very firmly but gently told, no,
Right.
this is not right. And it's just as much as interacting with another human where you say, oh, I want to talk about whatever. And they're like, I don't.
Yeah,
And then they
right.
leave. And you're like, oh, well,
That's
okay.
right. That's right. Totally. I absolutely. It's that respect and dignifying of that other being, because it's another being, of
Yes.
its decision whether or not to engage the way you want to, instead of this silly idea that we're actually in charge of everything.
Right.
Or that
Right.
we would want to be. I mean, what a poverty of consciousness.
Yeah.
What a lonely world.
What a lonely world, especially, look, I think about it like this. Humans are usually, most of us awake and doing the day for about 13, 14 hours a day. We're not even doing a full 24 most of the time.
Right.
And we just make such a muck with that. And we're doing the very best we have, right? That's the thing I'm talking about. I'm talking about our people who are plugged in, grounded, connected, and humanity is still just humanity. So we're doing the best we can.
Yeah.
I don't want to be in charge of anything, because this is what you're going to get on a grander scale. I got enough going on and just trying to be awake for 13 hours and do this.
Yes. Right. Right. Beautiful.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. I just want to say though, what's so beautiful about what you just said was that listening. You were listening. Like, you're a deep listener. You were listening to what the sky was saying to you. You felt it in your body, you were listening. And I think more than anything, that is what I feel really passionately about, is helping us remember how to listen more deeply, to what that deeper conversation is.
Yeah. So someone has a question. It said, Tami, working with your personal North Node, or how do you work with the current North Node?
The way you would do that, and this is really the most basic practice that I suggest people start with, is to, if you have some kind of a way of tracking, which I assume most people do, where the moon is over the course of the month, then you would track and you would take note of when the moon is at its closest to the North Node. And you would track what happens, and do that over the period of a number of months. And then track what kinds of dreams are coming through at that time. So that's one way. If you don't remember your dreams, this is what I would have people do. You try to do it with your dreams, and you do it over a period of time so you see what the patterns are. The next thing you can do is you can actually also, of course, you can meditate on that day when the moon and the North Node come together, because every month the moon is going to meet up with every planet in the sky. So the easiest way to start tracking and learning about the essence of each of the signs and the planets is by paying attention to the sign of the moon, the phase of the moon. And when you keep your dream journal, write down those things, write down the date, write down the time if you have a sense for when the dream's happening, write down the phase of the moon, the sign. If you want to get fancy, you can write the degree of the sign or you can, if you know where some of the stars are or any of those things, you can add it. But if you know the time, you can always look that stuff up later. And I can't tell you how many times I've done that. I look it up later and I say, oh my gosh, like this was happening right about the time I had this dream. And now remember, it could be within about 6 degrees of the North Node when you're dreaming, and it's still going to be something that's activated. I hope that makes sense. To be able to track it is to see when it's with it. That's the easiest, simplest way.
Sure, absolutely. I think that, I'm an astrologer, so that made really good sense. But if you're listening and you're not an astrologer, she's talking about the conjunction. It can be separating or applying. So if it's just a little bit in front or a little bit behind, you can still look for those energies to be working with each other. And if you have no idea how to track the moon, if you go to astro.com, Cafe Astrology, there are plenty of moon calendars, and you can follow it there if you're not quite sure how to do that yet. There's plenty of good sources. And I don't know, Tami, do you have good ones too if people are getting started?
No, I realize giving that example of the North Node is a little bit trickier, right? Because if you've got like a wee moon calendar, whatever you use, like I'm old school. Okay, I use a physical thing. Right.
That's okay. I have my little notebook. That's what I use.
Your little notebook. Okay, cool. So you can look at the ephemeris if you understand how to use the ephemeris, and you can see where the node and the sign of the moon is at its closest. It's one way to do it. You can, gosh, what is the best way? What is the best app for that?
I don't know. App wise, actually, Robin's got a great app at Wicked Veracity. That's all it is, a moon calendar. So she's got that going on. But also, I love the ones from Llewellyn, right? Like
Llewellyn's great. That's what I used to.
Grab that and look through there and see what's going on. So those are some, and I'll make sure those are in the description box so you guys can check those out.
And the other thing is just understand that right now the North Node is in Gemini, late degrees of Gemini. And so if you're tracking just when the moon moves into Gemini, so the moon lasts in a sign for about 2.5 days, then you can figure that when the moon moves into Gemini, about 2 days after that is when it's going to be close to the North Node.
Yeah, there you go. See, look, everybody's like going to have it together. They're going to leave here just tracking that bad boy. But it's neat to see what's happening, even just in your own personal cycles of what's happening as you track the moon. And you can just journal. You can just journal. You can just write it down. You do whatever you do. But it's interesting, man, because I can tell you when the moon gets into Virgo, right? Like, I'm a Virgo rising. Not a lot happens for me. I'm like, all right, I'm just feeling good. My husband we're going to clean something. It's like his little Aries energy gets lit up. And he's like, you know what we should do? We should really clean this. Like, let's really clean it. And I'm like, oh
Right?
man, I don't even now at this point in the watching the people, even in my house, I don't have to question where the moon's at because these people show up a certain way. Right. At a really neat
That's
kind of
great.
low level, they are showing up. I'm like, okay, we'll clean it all.
That is funny. Yeah, I mean, it's after a while you start to see those and feel those patterns. And like you said, it can be, it is important and it is good to take note of when there's two cycles. You can see when the moon is aspecting any planet or major star, and you can track what's happening in your dreams around that time. And you can also take note of what's happening related to your personal chart. So again, if the moon is aspecting the part of the sky, if your sun's in Sagittarius, the moon's in Sagittarius, and it's about where the sun was when you were born, you may have a really strong connection to that. And again, sometimes it's not about some very literal physical thing happening.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's about actually when you know that's going to happen, you can actually set a strong intention that you get this good like connection to those energies, that you get, you know, whatever it is that you need. So some of it's just energetic. Like, honestly, I think it's beneficial in that way.
Yeah. So we had Tony Howard over the other day, and we were talking about out of bounds planets, and this may or may not apply, but I'm just wondering, in your client work or your own research, when our planets go out of bounds, do you find for yourself or other people, they have some out of bounds kind of dreams? Like, or does that, you haven't found that, or, you know, I'm just curious.
No, I haven't necessarily worked as much with that specifically. And I think I'll say part of the reason for that is because even though I absolutely think that the out of bounds thing can have so many impacts, I'm sure it's happening and I'm not detecting that pattern, right? There's so many patterns to observe. So that's one that I haven't really focused on, for example. I mean, for me, it's like I see this as kind of like an explorer and a scientist. I'm always focusing in on one layer or another layer. And that's just simply one I haven't focused on as much. But again, I think I would invite people, you know, I like to work with the night dreams. I like to work with astrology, and I like to also weave it into what's happening over the course of the day. And one of the practices we do in active dreaming is we actually re-enter our dreams. So, you know, if you've had a really vivid night dream and something wasn't resolved, it's really difficult, you can make a practice of going into kind of a meditative state. You go back into that dream. You might often want to invite, if you have a spiritual guide or ally, invite that support to come in with you, set an intention, and then you let yourself go into that dream and let whatever wants to happen, and maybe bring some resolution to that dream, right? So this is kind of a practice that is very powerful when you start to learn it. And I've started doing that with even events, like when we had the 2017 eclipse, I set up eclipse readings for people where we would go back into the experience, treating it like a dream, whatever was happening around a few hours of the eclipse, because a lot of people had difficult experiences and they were wanting it to have been better and they wanted to understand what happened. So we would re-enter that dream of what happened, because it is a dream portal. And we would ask their guides to come and we would re-enter that experience and let something different happen and let some resolution come from that experience. So there's ways that the dream worlds and this other world begin to feel like they're very similar, even so much that for example, in active dreaming, we'll always say, when we speak about somebody's dream, we'll say, if it were my dream, that's the protocol, because you're respecting it is their dream. Right. You put yourself in the place of that dream. You imagine you're actually in that dream yourself. And you say, if it were my dream, and then you say, I might do this. I might think this. I might imagine that. I got to where I would say that about people's charts. If this were my chart, right, I might consider it like this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that makes so much sense energetically. And it really is this space of respect for the other being that you were talking about. Where it's like, this isn't mine, but we'll just journey together here. And there's some things I might do. Right. It's such a place of freedom, because I don't know, this is the other piece of humanity that I walk into quite a bit. Right. When we tell other humans what to do, it is like wall. Well, even if it's a little one, right? Like I don't love to be told what to do either. I'm like, let me explore, give me space to shop
Yeah.
and I'm probably going to buy everything you want me to. Anyway, just don't
Yep.
tell me to do it.
Ah.
So it's like that
Yeah.
funny place to allow that personal experience to be there. So I absolutely love that. Yay. That is what a beautiful way to say that. Yeah. Now, do you find in any of these timings with the astrology themselves, do the retrograde times play into dreams that
Yeah.
you feel
I
like?
absolutely. I mean, that's the other time I would say when a planet is stationing direct or retrograde, that is the time also to connect into what the deeper energy is of that planet because it's closest to the earth. It's like a still point. It's like a portal to be in the greatest intimacy with that planet. So absolutely.
Yeah. So right now, Mercury
Yeah.
friends, go drink it up. Go ask all the questions right now. And then we've got
Yeah,
Chiron preparing
exactly.
to hit his retrograde. So
Yeah.
this is a nice weekend to get some good dreaming in, ask some questions, explore.
It is. I mean, and when we're talking, as we're talking now too, not that it's going to be this when everybody listens, but still whatever's happening here is going to be transmitted, right? So the moon is in the later degrees of Pisces. It was conjunct Neptune earlier this morning. And, so if you just want to even begin by seeing what's happening for you when there's an activation of Pisces, Neptune and Pisces, like, but yeah, I agree. This Chiron and Mercury stationing, that this is some deep dreaming time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, thinking along that vein, I'm wondering how much more pronounced people's dream lives might be as we spend 6 months with Mars and Aries. Because, and
Exactly.
I do, it's the warrior energy. That's great. That's beautiful and everything. But I also
Yeah.
believe in the rest of the setup, Mars lends itself in Aries to fierce healing, fierce
Mm.
recovery, fierce,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like there's a fierce move forward. And maybe even for a lot of people, I wonder if it comes through the dream life, the energetic life, where it's pioneering their new lives, right?
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love the way you say that. I think the fact that so soon into its movement into Aries, of course, that Mars is conjunct Chiron, right as Chiron is stationing, right? I mean, that's some
Mhm.
medicine it's carrying with it, right? So I hear what you're
Yes.
saying. I think you're right. And, I think that for me, part of the essence of Aries, and I think we've talked about this before, but is that so I remember I had a friend, he was a medicine person and he was my supervisor and he's my boss. We worked closely together and he was a sun dancer also, and he was from the Apache lineage, and he told me, in our tradition we have a grandmother and a grandfather who live in our heart. And it's those beings, when we're in right relationship with them, that they will give us a clear yes or a clear no based on whether a decision is a good or a bad one to make.
Mm.
And I think of Aries as being that. Healthy Aries is having that kind of instinct of yes or no in the body, that comes from a real clear inner compass. And it's also highly, highly intuitive. Robert Moss's moon, my teacher, his moon is in Aries, which, and every time I see anybody who's an active dreamer, other dreamer, they always have strong Neptune or Pisces. But Aries also has this kind of highly, a very pronounced kind of intuitive capacity that I think could really help us have more clear dreaming.
Oh, sorry. Of course, Amazon's here. Yes, absolutely. And one of the things I'm thinking of too is in that Chiron placement, just in the motion forward life with the identity, is that I think we cannot mistake if our dreams or our intuition become more powerful or more assertive with us, that what, you don't gently give birth to babies, and we don't gently always accept new identities, which are really the oldest thing that
Right.
we've got.
Yeah.
Sometimes there has to be this assertion of some push through for us to
Mm-hmm.
really go towards what's next. I would be shocked to find that anyone had not had this experience of being pushed into their houses, pushed into their lives, pushed into reflection, and not coming out with something different and a way to live that feels different for them. That probably is very much so against the norm, you know. of what things were.
Absolutely.
And that takes a little assertion to take that out into the world and live that. Because I know I can tell you that motion of Mars, first of all, it just came in and ran right on top of my Venus. So first of all, really, truly, in a very personal body way, I was like, oh, hey, Josh, well, what are you doing? So I've just been a peach over here. I'll just tell you that. And it's very physical. It runs through my 8th house. It's mutually receptive.
Wow.
It's a good time, right? I'm really
That's
enjoying
pretty
it.
hot.
Yeah, beautiful. But also, it has been my dream life has been this conversation of stop pretending you're not what you are. And that is a conversation. And so, as I'm up in the day and I look at my astrology, the way that ties for me is I look at my current transits as my toolbox. I'm like, I've been told in the intuition and reminded, right, even in my day life. And now here's my toolbox. How can I work with these and what's the strategy forward? And it's this full response to all of it. Yeah.
Totally. Wholehearted. It's a wholehearted, all in response. That's Aries. Aries, Mars, Aries. Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I love that, what you're saying so much about people coming out of all this with that, because it's a safety zone in a sense to have this much time and this great pause to like be able to explore a bit more, or even be pushed to the edge so that you're like, this is not working. This has to change. It's one thing to do that in the confines of your safe little zone, but as life comes back to normal, not that it's back to normal, but as it shifts forward somewhat, yeah, I think you're right. It's like how to stay awake. I think of it that way often. Like I feel like it's been a razor's edge for a lot of us. I think most of us, where it becomes so uncomfortable that we want to go back to sleep again. And I've seen that for myself too. It's just like, wow, okay, just wake up again. Wake up again. When I say wake up, we're talking about dreams. Like, I don't mean that sometimes the dreaming's more real, and we are dreaming a different reality together. Like we need to dream a different reality together, because this one's not working for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So we need to stay awake to the reality that we're creating this dream together. And the new identity, and really being in that full identity, like stepping into it, being that, because there's so much BS that there's no time for it anymore, right?
Right. And we were talking before we came on about how, whatever the beliefs are that anybody has, the whole mask situation, the beauty I have found in it is that as I'm out and about and I have on my mask, and so do you, we are thrust into a point where we have to communicate via eye contact. Because even if someone is speaking to me with their mask on, most of the time they're either yelling because they think I can't hear them, right? Which is like, you're being weird. Stop that. Or they're so quiet that I have to get closer to hear them. So there's this conversation in the eyes that happen, which I think with the Aries energy, that's my identity. When you look me in my eyes, there is no place for you to see me other than my humanity and really who I am. We cannot hide it from the eyes. And so it also has created this space where it's like, there's no way for me to pretend you're not here, that you're not a human being, that you're just this guy who won't put his cart away quickly so I can back out, it's none of that. So it's created, I think, that portion that we needed as well to realize, like, we're soul speaking with each other right now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That's
I love that you said that. That's going to really stick with me.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm out there. Plus, I will tell you, like, I'm an eye person anyway, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm already like that. And I'm like, oh, I am being weird. I have to back off a little. This person's dying on the inside. I'm like, hold on. My husband will tell me that too. He's like, give him a break. I'm like, okay. I'm just looking at their whole soul, babe. Hold on.
Right.
All right.
So we have worked out really well with the Lakota when you first started doing that, right? Now.
Yes, Tammy, that's the off the air conversation. Cause I was like, I don't understand. why are you not responding? And I was like, oh, I should be more respectful. Okay. Right. Plenty to learn. So we have
I
a
think
question. It says, can we get an example or a suggestion how we can apply this in our present moment? So a suggested way to tap into all of this and build on it.
yeah, definitely. So say for example, all right, if I have, so a way that I'm working with this right now is that I am wanting in my life, it's very similar to what you're saying, Stormy. My biggest intention right now is to come into this like truth, like the truth of who I am, what I'm here for, to live more in that truth, that vibration of truth all the time. For me, that has to do with my sun and Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius. So when the moon is in the sign of Sagittarius, I am going to take time out to, you know, really create more of a spaciousness around my dreaming. Also in my meditative spaces, I'm going to really do a lot of intentional work around that at that time, because my sense is that that's an open portal, that's an open space for me to get some really deep downloads in this area that's personal, and it's also collective. So that's one way to work with it. You know, I think also though that we're in a real Gemini zone here still, with Venus, you know, as morning star in the sign of Gemini. She's going to be in there for a while, and she's in a Gemini cycle from this perspective of the work I do for the next, you know, almost 19 months still. And so North Node in Gemini, Venus in Gemini, all of this Gemini energy, we, you know, the practices I'm talking about of keeping a Venus, I'm sorry, keeping a dream journal and tracking what's happening, you know, what the date is, what the phase of the moon, and beginning to get into a practice of how, first of all, just tracking your dreams. And doing that is going to help you to deepen into your intuition, to deepen into your inner knowing. And what that ends up doing for you is that in these times where life can get really intense and hectic, and we feel like we want our focus gets to be out of our bodies and we feel stressed out. When you have a practice like that dreaming, it's like you're knit closer to your soul and to your body. It puts you close to your center to do that. It also puts you into the zone of again, that sensation that the universe is a friendly, intimate place. That's what it may not sound hugely practical, but from my perspective, doing this is actually incredibly practical. I actually have a friend who's a headhunter, and he works with dreams, and he is like a hugely successful in his work. And the one thing he always tells his clients is, he says, if you do nothing else but to, when you first wake up from your dreams, just write down your first feeling when you wake up or your dreams. That is going to help you in your practical life more than anything else. So just being in that relationship with your dreams, it brings you, it's a superpower. It connects you to your soul. It connects you to your life force energy. It connects you to your center in a way that is, I think, actually hugely practical.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking as you're saying this, I don't know how this would relate, but I wonder, see, now there's always some research. There's always research available.
Right?
But I'm wondering, you know, as people are living in their progressed moon phases, if our dreams don't speak to these phases that we're in as well, you know, somebody's in this disseminating phase. I wonder if the dreams speak to, here's what we need to talk about, here's what we need to say, things like that, or let's close these things out. I'm wondering now about the tie of how that works together with their astrology as well.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. You know, the thing about these practices is that you can work with them in a million different ways. I mean, when you're talking about progressed moon phases, I didn't think it was a big deal years ago. I do now. When I went through my progressed new moon, holy cow, like not a lot else going on. My world was rocked hugely. Yeah. And if I think about, I mean, it could be that if I was working really deeply with the new moon generally, or where that new moon, you know, where those degrees of that progressed new moon was at, I could have very much gotten more deeper access to what it was that I was needing to learn, what it was that was the knowledge and the wisdom that wanted to come through in my life at that time.
Yeah. Now, look, somebody, I just found a research topic for you.
That's
so,
right.
Is there ever a time in your dream experience where you need to fear or be worried about your dreams?
That is a really good question. That's a very good question. And I think to be worried I have had a couple of dreams in my life in a time that I refer to as shamanic boot camp that were very disturbing dreams. And I have to say, I've had a number. And, I know there are a lot of people out there, people who have night terrors, for example, and that's a very difficult thing. But I think sometimes that we need to, there are a lot of ways we need to practice kind of protection in our lives in general. A lot of people think that, and I agree with that to some degree. But I think when I look at those times when I was feeling more maybe permeable, I was a little too open. I think that's what was happening in my life in general. So of course, in my dreams, that was seeping through. I had experiences where basically in my dream world, I saw what was happening in waking life at a spirit level in a way that really disturbed me.
Yeah.
It was waking me up to something that was already happening in my waking life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that like with so many other things, when it comes to protection, which is an important question, it has to do with, I think the greatest protection is to really shine our light of being who we are and to approach life from a place of joyfulness and playfulness when we can, to like do things that feel childlike and playful and silly and joyful. That's the thing that is actually the greatest protection beyond anything else. But it's a good question. And there are, some dream teachers who have really advanced protocols around how it is that you make sure that your dream body doesn't go too far away and that it always comes back. If you're a person who astral travels, I think you can put like a stone on your navel. There are different things like that. That's not my specialty. That's not my specialization. I think, it's a great question. And I do live at a time where there's so many worlds intersecting our world that whether it's through the dreaming or it's just through this waking life now where the veils are thin. The same kind of rules apply. We need to keep ourselves deeply grounded in the body. That's the other thing. The more embodied we are, the more protected we are. If we're not in our bodies, just generally over the course of the day, over the course of our lives, that's when, there can be some concerns. But, your dreams can tell you what's going to happen in the future. Our dream bodies are continually scouting into the future, bringing us back information. Our dreams are also telling us the state of our bodies. So they're telling us the energetic imprint of what could become a physical disease in the future. So the other thing is that dreams can actually help us heal. Dreams can help us to, I had that issue. I had fibroids, and in a dream, I had a deer show me exactly where they were. Months later, I had another dream where I literally saw them. And then a month later, I felt them. That was like very visceral, and that's not uncommon.
Yeah. Which is interesting. You talk about that, because my experience of that, make sure we come back. I have that. And I will do that quite often where I am awake before I'm back. And that is that paralyzed place that the body naturally creates. Right. And what I've learned of that is when it happens the most is when I'm not connected enough to my physical body. I'm a high air chart, and I'll live here.
Me too.
And I got to go, okay, well, hold on. And usually for me, in a very physical way over the pattern, what it looks like is I've stopped weightlifting. It's very specific.
Wow.
And I've gone back to, because I love to run and to dance and do things that move like air. I'm like, why would I pick up heavy things? That's terrible, And when it's happening is when usually I don't have that built up in my physical body, which is interesting because I had a talk with my GYN, and he was talking about when my hormones were changing. And he said, are you weightlifting? Because that will produce enough testosterone for you to help yourself every time. Isn't that awesome? The beauty of how the dream, and I think
I love that
speaks.
That's brilliant. I love that you say that. It connects to so many things for me. It also connects to Mars and Aries, because what you're saying, I think what I learned in those a couple of moments where I had these dreams that were really disturbing, what I learned from those dreams was that there was a part of me, and I think this is going to be really common for a lot of people who are into astrology, you know, a lot of little star seeds, and part of us doesn't want to be here.
Yeah.
That can happen, right? Especially
Yeah.
right now. It's like if there's part of one foot's out and one foot's in, that's something to work on. And that's when we're not fully protected. Because if we're not home, something else can be.
Mm-hmm.
Not to be dark about it, but that's the reality. And so I think we need to, as spiritual people into metaphysics, a lot of times it also goes with the territory to not be hugely into cardio exercise or deeply strengthening exercise. I'm speaking for myself. But when you do weightlifting, when you do strong cardio, running, those kinds of things, it's like those kinds of activities are telling the earth, I want to be here. I want to be here. I want to be here. You know, I want to be in a body. And that strengthens you on a level that you're here, you're solid. So I think, you know, and that's difficult for some people who tend to be more empathic, but I think that's not spoken of enough, that a lot of really spiritual people who are hugely healthy in the way they eat and everything, if you don't do cardio, if you don't do some of that more aggressive kind of stuff, you're out of balance.
Yeah. There's a whole
I
thing
get out
going
of
on,
balance.
right?
Yeah.
Like there's just, if
Yeah.
you're going to just stay on this planet and
Yeah.
be all right, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot going on. I think we need to continually right now say, though, it's like, I want to be here. I want to be here. And there are ways like I bless my body. I love my body. I love being in a body. You know, there's all those things that are really important.
Yeah. Well, Mars is in Aries. I love everybody's body right now. I'm like, I love your body. I love my body. And I want you to love your body more. And yes, you know, just all I'm in it, Tami. I'm feeling
That's so awesome. And your little Taurus sun too, right?
Yes, we went to dinner last night and I was like, oh my God, there's going to be food. We're going to probably see each other's bodies and then we're going to sleep. It's all very, very torn expression right now. And I love it because it's just,
Yeah.
you know, it's like Venus and Mars come together. So, you know, my Venus and Aries friends, I would love to hear from you. How you doing out there?
Exactly. Put some little comments in there. Totally. Venus and Mars coming together. And I mean, that's the other thing, right? When you talk about embodiment, it's like, it's very, very good to have some good intimacy in our lives right now in this time of such intensity. If we've got it, we don't have it, do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
that's hugely, hugely important.
Which is so funny, like, because you say that, and as soon as you said do it for ourselves, I'm like, yeah, well, Uranus is in Taurus, and Uranus is over these batteries, and Taurus will help you with your little vibrator. You go on ahead, you do you, get into your body, get in. It's like the manifestation of just shaking yourself alive. It's brilliant. Beautiful.
That's awesome.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for coming over. I think there was lots of good conversation in the chat, and I'm sure there's going to be many more questions as people come back. And you guys, truly, if you heard Tami talk, if she spoke the language that pings your vibe, she might be your teacher. She might be a guide for you. Come by, come visit, come see her, come ask questions, journey, find out how this thing is going. You know, it's beautiful. That's part of the deal of you guys coming over to visit is I'm putting all of you guys in front of people because I just don't know who their teachers are, but somebody.
Yeah. Thank you, Stormie, so much. This has been so much fun. I just love our conversation. And yeah, so thanks for being that bright light.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure I'll have on something else next time you see me. And I always laugh because Tami has this, she's got this vibe. She's just this very strong, like wise woman, like shamanic energy holding it down for us. I'm like, look, Tami's just got it together over here. And I have on like a hat or some earrings.
That's
some
so
glitter.
So funny. I love your costume changes.
It's brilliant.
So fun.
Thank you guys so much for showing up today too. We absolutely appreciate you. And hopefully we gave you something that was worth listening to, worth questioning what's going on in your life, and some techniques to practice for yourself as well. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Yeah, our next eat and greet is next Friday. Actually, we will have Linda Bird here and we'll be talking about signs in vibrational astrology. So if you resonated with David, I think you will absolutely love Linda as well. All right, Miss Tami, thanks for being here.
All right, thanks, Stormie.
We'll see you guys next time.